My name is Joshua Amponsem. Um, I'm the founder of Green Africa Youth Organization and a co-director for the Youth Climate Justice Fund. Today, I'll be helping moderate a very important conversation on AI and oceans with specific focus on Africa. And we will have some really brilliant scientists who have been working to protect our blue economy and our oceans on the continent come share some specific scientific perspectives on how we can leverage AI to protect our oceans, to help solve climate, and to build a stronger economy. But if you are here and you are not very familiar with any of this at all, I'm going to do just a quick context setting to help sort of get everyone a little bit, not on the same page, but a little bit in a place where the conversation that comes afterwards will be a bit easier to follow. So we are at a moment now, 10 years after Paris Agreement. Climate change is still hitting hard. Adaptation and resilience is top of the agenda for Africa as a continent. As we do that, we recognize that there are unique vulnerabilities for coastal ecosystems. And those vulnerabilities are very sensitive and require a lot of efforts to help build adaptive capacity towards that. But as President Ruto said, those challenges and vulnerabilities can also be seen as abundance of opportunities and solutions. So now we are at a moment where we are trying to move from staying with the problems we have, the vulnerabilities, and the lack of radical and transformative solutions that can really help us tackle climate change, sort of hit the nail on the head, to looking forward to opportunities and potential solutions that can really help solve this problem, put leadership on the continent, and put the responsibility and the leadership to these coastal communities. But to be able to bridge that gap, we need several things. One of those things that we are about to talk about today is the role of AI in doing that. Then the other part, of course, is the broader role of science in helping answer some of these questions. Now, we know that AI already is helping us to really aggregate data at a very macro level. And for marine solutions like MCDR and potential options that are being explored, like marine cloud brightening, AI could help us in simulations that could get us a little bit further, at least from modeling perspective, to understand this further before we even move ahead on this. But now the scientific capacity is low, coastal communities are not involved as much, and in some contexts, the conversation doesn't even reach the people they need to reach. So this will all form part of today's conversation. So this is what I'm going to do. We will have three key scientists, some of whom are also working with policymakers and our policymakers themselves, who are going to come on to the panel. I'm going to have a conversation with them. But before I do that, I want to call on Ernest Ofori for the launch of a new initiative that I've been in the making for almost 3 years now, called the Emerging Climate Frontiers. I'm not going to say much about it. If not, I'll be taking the words out of his mouth. So I'm going to pass over to Ernest to tell us what Emerging Climate Frontiers, what this is about, what it seeks to do, and why Africa Climate Summit is a good place to soft launch this initiative. Over to you, Ernest.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Please, am I audible? Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for being in this session, and thank you, Joshua, for that amazing contest setting. So, in 2022, the climate team at GAIO took a bold step. We named a challenge that is practically the glaring inequalities in the rapid evolving field of climate technologies, particularly in CDR, carbon dioxide removal, solar radiation management, and AI governance. We saw firsthand how African voices, especially those of policymakers and civil society actors, were being sidelined in critical global dialogues. Not because of lack of will, but due to structural barriers and persistent knowledge gaps. At the same time, we observe a troubling pattern where well-resourced Western NGOs imposing their narratives on African institutions under the guise of capacity building, which we all know as a modern echo of colonial practices. So, in response to this, we set out to build something fundamentally different. Since 2022, our team at Gaio has focused on creating safe, accessible spaces where African voices can lead climate discussions, allowing local stakeholders to shape their own positions on frontier climate technologies, what we call climate interventions, and build meaningful cross-sector partnerships. It hasn't been easy, but for some few years, within the space of 2 years, our work has achieved several key milestones. We launched the continent's first open virtual dialogue on geoengineering to discuss these frontier climate technologies, or what we call climate interventions, from distinctively African perspective. We also did pioneer the first carbon accounting and decarbonization training program in West Africa, equipping young professionals with the skills and expertise to lead decarbonization activities and drive a sustainable climate action across the region. Beyond dialogues, we have invested in institutional strengthening by partnering with African experts to build capacity within national research and regulatory bodies. This includes collaborations with the CSIR, which is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, both in Ghana and South Africa. We've also engaged the EPAs across Africa, and we've done a lot of work with the academic institutions. What began as an innovative project within Gaio has evolved into something larger, a trusted continental platform that is actively shaping how Africa approaches and engages with emerging climate technologies on its own terms. Now, after 3 years of dedicated work, we are taking the next natural step. We are transitioning out of Gaio, the Green Africa Youth Organization, to become Emerging Climate Frontiers, which is ECF, an independent organization to scale our impact, deepen our research, and sharpen our influence. ECF is not just an initiative, it's a continuation and evolution of the team that has led this work since its inception, now ready to meet the growing demand across the continent and globally. Now, the heart of ECF is a clear mission to reshape global governance of frontier climate technologies by centering African leadership, knowledge, and political agency. A core part of our vision is to increase Africa's research and innovation capacity in frontier climate technologies, from CDR, carbon dioxide removal, SRM, solar radiation management, and artificial intelligence, AI, so that African policymakers are equipped not just to respond to the global trends, but to shape them. Finally, we are ready to grow. We are ready to lead. And we invite you to partner with us in the next chapter to support ECF as we boldly step into climate technology frontier with justice, clarity, and purpose. And if there is an African-driven initiative that is going to champion African voices and strengthen institutional capacity, then there's no better place to have this launch than the African Climate Summit. On this note, Emerging Climate Frontiers is duly launched. Please, a round of applause. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you, Ernest, for sharing that and for your work on making this possible. And as you rightfully said, Africa Climate Summit, both the first summit in Nairobi and the second one have consistently hammered on African voices, African leadership for climate. And I think every effort towards that is rightly in the right place and definitely very much welcome. I'm realizing that we're missing one of our panelists, Professor Nanama Brown Clothing, who might join us later on. But for now, I would like to have two of our panelists join me on stage so that we can get the conversation started while we wait for the third one to arrive. So, it's my absolute pleasure to have Dr. Angela Ndaka. Please join me on stage, who is a lecturer at the University of Witwatersrand. And then we're going to have Dr. Mariam also join us on stage, who is also lead at the Ocean Climate Innovation Hub in Kenya. Now, both of my panelists are very much experts. Mariam, you are an ocean scientist, you are an expert in this field, so really looking forward to your inputs. And then I know that when it comes to AI, we will have Dr. Angela share a lot with us. So I'm very, very excited for this. And when we have Professor Nanama Brown join us, she currently, she's a scientist and IPCC author herself, but also currently a policymaker. So I'm very keen to see how her role, combining both being a scientist and a policymaker, how that is going. I'm going to start my questions, and I'm going to start with Dr. Miriam. Let's start with MCDR, because after all, we are the Oceans Pavilion, and I know that the colleagues who have helped put this pavilion together are very much ocean champions in many, many ways. But we know that when it comes to Africa, our oceans play a very critical role, not just as an economic hub for many people, but also for grassroots communities. This is a source of livelihood for many of them. So how could MCDR, such as macroalgae farming, alter nutrient dynamics in African marine environments, and potentially leading to shifts in biodiversity that could have either, of course, negative consequences for these communities, and potentially, of course, not just in one particular region, but we're talking about 30,000 kilometers plus of coastal line we have on the continent. What are the opportunities there? But how could it also alter, the marine as these communities know it to be?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, hi. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I really love talking about MCDR, marine carbon dioxide removal, because it's I would say an emerging technology, and also it aligns well with my work as a researcher. And what fascinates me, it's because it's in Africa. It's still quite new, and we are trying to see how we can bring it to Africa and do it in a way that is equitable, inclusive, and also responsible. So before I answer your question, I'd like to also mention that with this marine carbon dioxide removal, we are actually developing an African roadmap for marine carbon dioxide removal. And we are working on this in collaboration with our partners, Ocean Visions, Carbon to Sea. But also, this is work that we are working together with Tanzania Ocean Climate Innovation Hub, because the first workshop was done in Tanzania. So there are different types of MCDR technologies from the blue carbon ecosystem that many African countries are already doing, mangrove restorations and seagrass. But also there are these other technologies like seaweed farming and ocean alkalinity enhancement. And the question you're asking is about macroalgae, which is seaweed. And I think that's a technology that can be adaptable to Africa, because countries like Namibia are already doing kelp farming. And they're doing it for carbon removal, but also they're using the seaweed to produce biostimulants that support African communities. So based on that, it shows, number one, macroalgae cultivation for carbon dioxide removal is something that can be done in Africa and is already being done in another country. And number two, it's something that can have other benefits. So in regards to the ecosystem, you can look at it in two ways. Number one, the positive sides of the ecosystem. Because when you grow seaweed, it supports the ecosystem, and it can also improve the health of that ecosystem. And number two is it can have, the negative side, extraction of a lot of nutrients from the water that can also affect other marine
But also, this
organisms.
is work
So
that we're
it's
working
important when you're looking
together
at
with
these
Tanzania
climate
Ocean Climate
technologies,
Innovation
especially
Hub
if you're
because
deploying anything into the ocean, look at what is the positive side, what positive things does this bring to the environment as well as to the society or the community that depend on the ocean. And also, what are the risks are we going to face and how can we mitigate that? How can we use probably technology to solve some of the problems or identify them before they happen? So I believe that with careful, planning and scientific, data and collaboration, this is
something
something
that
that
can
can
be
be
done
done
and
and
have
have
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
value
value
to
to
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was that that was very very insightful. And before we go to Dr. Angela, I want to go back to Mariam again for you to briefly just touch upon the roadmap for those who don't know anything about that. How is it being developed? Who is involved? Because I mean, one of the biggest critique to emerging climate frontiers in general is the fact that a few scientists and a few researchers who know it could quickly advance it uh, by leaving others behind and go ahead and to probably implement something that could, of course, have a lot of consequences to community. So now that we know there's a roadmap being developed, I would want you to share a little bit more about how is it being developed, who is involved, what stage is it now, if folks here have input, how could they make input into that?
Bringing these people together in one room for 3 days to discuss what do we need. So we looked at finance. We had 5 working groups: finance, science to entrepreneurship, policy, research, science and research, as well as funding. Then these 5 working groups sat down and looked at what are the opportunities and what are the challenges if we were to do MCDR work in Africa. Then the other thing that I would like to mention about the roadmap, I said it's a live document. It's still in development. So we are still reaching out to different organizations as well as people from different countries, experts, to come and join this, I would say, movement. Yeah, in emerging climate technology. The thing is, for a long time, Africans have been receivers of new technology. Although we want to receive, but we want to receive in our own way. Yeah, I know we have scientists, we have the resources, but where we lack, we are open to collaboration. So this is an open call to anyone who knows someone, or if you're here and you know this space, please, you can talk to me or talk to Shamim there, and we are going to, Kiswahili tunasema tusukume gurudumu pamoja. Let's push this thing forward together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was brilliant. That was brilliant. And I like how you broke it down to it is not something that is figured out already. It's something that is still being developed. You've had the first consultations with different partners, very important. And I think later on, I like your ending words of if you know anyone, if you are interested yourself, this is something we need to co-create together. And I know that within a lot of the multilateral spaces, we keep talking about technology transfer, from one place to another. And I like what you said about we want the transfer to happen, but we want it to happen on our own terms. because we have scientists, we have researchers, and we need them to lead on this as well. And in some cases, be the ones also developing new technologies from scratch here, because that is also possible. So thank you for holding that vision. And I also really want to admire the fact that this process has very much involved a lot of young people. I mean, Shamim herself is very involved, and she's a young person, and as a young person here launching a new initiative on this. And then on the gender side, all female panel. I'm very excited to be the guy to moderate that. But really a big admiration for a lot of the efforts that is going on this, because that is not very common in a traditional climate space, right? So I wanted to flag that. Now I'm going to come to Angela quickly. So Mariam mentioned about the relevance of our blue economy, and we know that AI is on top speed right now in the world we're living in, right? Whether we like it or not, it's moving at a speed that we all have to sort of try to catch up, because it's really at the speed of light. How do you think AI and machine learning can really play a significant role in protecting Africa's blue economy?
Right. Yeah. So I want to believe that all of you know what AI is, artificial intelligence, and what it is doing. And probably I can take a back to just elaborate what it is all about, because I know there is a lot of hype about these technologies and what they are doing and what they can do. And yeah, so these are tech that can actually cause a lot of positive impact to our climate or even ocean economies, as well as negative impacts, depending on how they are placed or how they are positioned in our continent or how they are positioned in our ecosystems. So AI basically is part of the smart technologies. When we are talking about AI and emerging tech from machine learning and all that, it's about algorithms or smart technologies learning from data and learning patterns of how things happen. So imagine when it rains in your village. Most of the time, who used to predict when it is going to rain? It used to be our elders. They used to look at the patterns, the clouds, and then they would tell that it is about to rain. Or in our village, I used to see some birds fly. And when some certain birds fly with some certain noises, the elders would say that it is about to rain. And for sure, 2 weeks down the line, it would rain. And those are some of the traditional knowledges that we used to predict when it is about to rain. And similarly, when we go to the ocean communities, the communities around the ocean, they hold also such knowledges. They will tell you when we are about to experience a big tide or a small tide, or when the oceans are not happy. I'm going to use a local word, like the oceans are not happy, or they are happy and they are calm and all that. And those are the languages the local communities can easily communicate to you by prediction. And so these technologies are coming now to support this kind of knowledges and predict these kind of patterns with a lot of precision. So with data collected over time from the communities as well as from the oceans, then AI is able to improve what we call the blue economies, from how the fishing communities benefit to how the fishes themselves or their marine ecosystem can be able to survive in the deep seas, to how even we can be able to protect those ecosystems from issues like pollution, deep sea oil leakages, and all that. So some of the things I'm going just to highlight a few of the of ways in which AI has been able to contribute in different places, or is being used in different places to shape blue economy. And I'll start from the beginning. Where do the oceans start from? I mean, most of the time we think that we just have the oceans here, but we go back to the glaciers. How many people have heard of the glaciers? I know we don't have glaciers in Africa, but I know we don't even think about the glaciers. But whenever we think about our oceans in Africa, we've got to think about the glaciers in Iceland, the glaciers in Alaska, the glaciers in Greenland. Why do we need to think about them? Because their melting, including the increasing of what we call global temperature, causes the melting of such glaciers and can easily raise the sea level, which affects the people living around the seas, including their livelihoods and all that. Also, they also help regulate the temperatures there. So AI is being used to ensure that we learn the patterns of how the temperatures in the glaciers are changing and managing that to ensure that the glaciers are remaining intact. Because a scientist I was talking to the other day, a glaciologist, was talking about how fast the glaciers are melting. And this one is a threat to our own climate, because in as much as you may not see the glacier melting from that end, it will have impact to the Indian Ocean. It will have impact to Atlantic Ocean, which is bordering us. And that means raising sea levels, floods, and all those other things that come with it. Now, secondly, AI has enabled, and actually it's happening in Africa in so many ways. We have been able to create applications and solutions that can predict weather patterns, that can support fishing communities and the communities living along the oceans, to be able to understand what time is good for them to be able to manage their marine economy activities. Another way AI is being used is able to predict the ocean patterns, including how the marine ecosystem is living. Some time ago, there was an oil leakage somewhere in the America, in the seas, along the America seas, deep seas. And it was not detected until there was a lot of death of the marine ecosystem. But today, AI and those systems can actually detect such leakages from very minor levels before they even cause catastrophic damages to the marine ecosystem. They also can be able to study the behaviors of the marine ecosystem. And I think that tells you a lot when we are talking about high carbon concentration that is affecting the fish life or the ecosystem life. You will not know that the fish are getting tired or the fish are dying or they are actually threatened by high carbon levels until you're able to study how they are behaving, how their populations are reducing or they are increasing, or how the populations of the other parts like the algae are being affected, so that those changing patterns of what is happening in the deep seas can be studied using these particular technologies. Also, AI has been used to do this deep sea exploration. I know when we are talking about the climate, we want to talk about the ecosystem, we want to talk about the animal. But are we also talking about potentially what minerals could be in the deep seas for Africa? You know, we always talk about the fish, the fishing communities and all that. But I have never heard anyone talking about that we could have actually be able to have minerals and oil in the deep seas, which other countries are exploring. But because we do not have such technologies that can enable us to explore those minerals, those treasures without threatening the marine life. So artificial intelligence is now capable of studying and understanding where the minerals are and targeting those particular spaces. It's also able to predict and guide the safe spaces where carbon can be extracted, because most of the time, if you cannot predict where there is a high concentration of carbon or where the sea life is, so that you don't threaten it, then you're going to extract or remove that carbon, but you may also threaten life by bringing technologies in that place. So those kind, understanding the data and understanding the patterns of animals, understanding the pattern of sea ecosystem enables people to be able to do targeted removal of carbon. Now, the last of it is AI can understand using the data or understanding the data can understand the salinity, the stability, basically the sea conditions. I am imagining that when we are using artificial intelligence developed elsewhere, and when we are using artificial intelligence developed with data like used in Kenya, and I know our rivers, by the way, our rivers are the ones that take the water to the ocean, and most of our rivers are polluted. So if I am studying Kenya, or if I'm trying to predict the salinity or the stability of the oceans in Kenya using data or a solution developed for Canada, then I would definitely get it wrong. So that's why AI developed within here to understand the ocean conditions of Africa is very important. So I think I've been able to talk about the role and what it would help much. But there are so many ways it can be able to do, including having small robots like fish robots that can be able to understand what is happening around the sea.
I like where this is going.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. There's so much in what you said, and I would want to unpack them. But one thing that cuts across everything you said, and I'm going to come back to you later on, is data.
Yep.
Almost everything you said is impossible without data and good quality data, which we know that we are missing a lot of that on this continent. So I'm going to come back to you later for you to throw more light on while you advocate and the role of AI in helping us sort of understand the precision, productivity, and even high efficiency and productivity when it comes to carbon removal and sequestration, what are the systems that need to be in place for us to get the data that can help build, in your words, African-led AI systems that can understand, of course, our ecosystems, the rivers that flows into the ocean and all of that. But before I come to that, we have our third panelist here, Professor Nanama Brown Kluche, who is also the CEO of the Ghana's Environmental Protection Agency. So, someone who has a very deep science background, but is also a policymaker. And Prof. Brown, welcome.
Thank you.
So you didn't miss much. What you missed was a very high advocacy for AI and the role that it can play for protecting our blue economy. And before that, Dr. Miriam had really set a very good context on the way that sort of when it comes to CDR, the role it could play, but also the collective effort on developing a roadmap for Africa that can help understand how do we actually implement MCDR that can ensure that, of course, different voices are included in this roadmap, but highlighting that already on the continent, some countries like Namibia are already growing kelp, which is not only removing sort of carbon, but it's also providing livelihood opportunities for communities and for people and helping with the ecosystem. I'm going to turn to you on a particular part of this conversation when it comes to ocean, which is marine cloud brightening, right? And of course, sort of solar radiation modification and management as a broader concept. And thinking, when you think of oceans and you think of our quest to reduce carbon, how could the two come together to A, increase risk that we are not very familiar with, or potentially help reduce risk that we're already known to? And to sort of give us an intro to that, when we think of the role that MCDR could play or MCB's marine cloud brightening could play in this continent.
Thank you. I think is it loud enough? It's okay? Yeah, thank you. And I want to apologize for coming in late. I just finished one talk and I had to jump in here. So thank you for also taking the lead on this this topic. So generally, the ocean is heavy. We know the ocean contains 70% of the space that we have on Earth. And someone asked sometime that why do we still call it Earth if the ocean has the majority of the space we have on the Earth? So it also able to have a capacity to absorb more heat from the Earth. So when we're talking about global warming, we associate a lot of heat absorbed by the ocean. The marine cloud brightening, it's a method that is a solar radiation modification method that helps, or potentially to help, reduce the heat that is contained in the ocean or stored by the ocean. So this method, it's an idea proposed. There are a number of experiments done on it. The idea is to reduce the warming in the ocean. What we don't know, as you asked, is the risk associated with it. So I came to meet Doc say the protection of the marine species. How much do we get into cooling the ocean? What should be the frequency? What should be the extent of this action in cooling the ocean? Each of every action we take affects the ocean, and not just the ocean, the larger climate. So it affects other variables in the atmosphere as well. So bringing in AI, now I also met the precision here. It's important that we do this with precision. So you won't just want to apply the methodology if we globally accept that this is the way we should go in cooling the earth. At the moment, we don't have enough governance system around this method, solar radiation modification in general, and the different other methods under it. So because we don't have that, we also don't have control in doing these experiments or research or the activities in this space responsibly, or protection or guiding us in doing things responsibly. We know the field of AI on its own also, yes, we have some policies around AI in some countries very strongly, in other countries very loosely. Bringing that again into this other space makes it even more complicated. So the responsibility we have in applying the artificial intelligence in every space that we do or we act, we need to also consider the platform where we are coming from. Ordinarily or normally, we use climate models in predicting the climate system, the ocean performance, the atmosphere, and all of that. We still need data. In fact, good enough data, quality data in doing that. We have advanced in the climate modeling space. We have reached a point that precision is necessary, and we know the capability of AI in providing that precision we need in climate modeling. So climate modelers are already exploring that space of AI in these applications. Even with the method of solar radiation modification, we are applying that with climate models. So we inject, for the atmosphere, we inject aerosols into the atmosphere. We see the impact. Naturally, we have seen some natural processes that cool the atmosphere. So we normally use, how do you call it, the punotubo, volcanic eruption scenario in cooling the earth naturally, because volcanic eruptions occur naturally. After some time, we experience cooling of the earth globally. So scientists thought we could mimic this process in cooling the earth. But then the aftermath or the after effects of this process, is it a long-lasting cooling? For how long? Or short-term cooling? Because every single activity of the atmosphere affects the climate system in different ways. So I always say that in a climate system, we don't have what is small or what is big. A small additional activity could escalate to bigger things depending on what is already in the system. So we need to understand this process properly. Although there's the general trend of cooling or general idea of cooling with, let's say, SRM or this aerosol injection in the atmosphere, with that cooling, how does that affect rainfall? How does that affect temperature? It's cooling, but long-term temperature, we can't be sure. How that affects other variables in the atmosphere, like wind system, which is a very critical component of the climate system, and even for the ocean temperatures. We know that the ocean is another complicated system. The surface, the middle, and then the lower part of the ocean, they play very critical role in its circulation. So whilst we have wind system at the surface mixed with the temperatures at the surface plus every other variables happening at the surface, it's different from the middle part, it's different from the lower part. So we have circulation of the ocean that misses these processes from time to time. We have upwelling and downwelling of the ocean. And each, depending on what is happening at the surface, what is happening underneath, it gives the ocean another process altogether, and it equally affects the atmosphere. Whilst we have the atmospheric variables also affecting the ocean. So in all of these things, we want to understand how it will impact marine species, marine temperature, marine salinity, impact everything, including the atmosphere. In doing that, I advocate for research. Ordinarily, climate modeling, maybe small outdoor experiments that will have maybe small impact in the atmosphere or in the ocean system. But as I said earlier on, what is small may be big, what is big may be small. But then we have to also trade off at some point. Is it more riskier not to know, or you want to know the risk? So I feel that if we know and we put mitigation measures, it will help us better plan than if we don't know and things happen in abruptly. We don't want to have such risk happening. So I feel like there's more risk in not wanting to know or not knowing than you know the risk and then you plan the mitigation measures against the happenings. My take.
Thank you so much. That was very detailed. Yeah, very detailed, and you gave a lot of pointers, right? You started with um, trying to get us on the basics of what MCBs are, marine cloud brightening. Then you connected that back to the broader topic of SRM and the science around it, the role of AI, how far scientists have gone with the modeling, particularly on this continent. And at the end, you came back to there are certain actions we need to take to understand the risk. And I want to go back to Mariam on that because one of the things that you mentioned, because you started by saying that you like talking about MCDR, right? And you want people to get comfortable talking about it. But as Prof said, it's difficult to quantify what is small and what is big, right? Because what is small in a global context could be big for a local community, right? So that is where sometimes the tensions get very high, specifically for MCDR and like your example of Namibia is already doing something, is giving multiple benefit. But how do we ensure that at a broader scale, particularly for science as a scientist, how can research really help us to ensure that MCDR implementation protects not only the blue economy as a whole, but actually also the marine ecosystem, the individuals and the people who live by these communities for the long term? What is the role of research in that, and how? What is the how that is required to be able to do that at this stage where we are?
Um, um, that's an interesting question. I'm saying that because I want to to align my thoughts. So anyway, I think people need to redefine how we do research because my background is science. I work in the university. So many times researchers do things in the lab and then that is it. We publish nice papers, that is enough. Uh, how do we communicate that research? I think it's important to also be able to communicate our findings, and also, do our findings have any impact in our policies? Do they contribute to the policies? And also, how do our findings also support with implementation of these scientific innovations, I will say. So redefining how we do research means collaboration from the start. Like I want to do research on MCDR. I want to set up a pilot, for example. How am I engaging the people from, other research institutes, the community? How am I engaging? Because those are the users of the ocean. They are fishermen. In Kenya, we have BMUs, and we need to engage those people, because if I deploy something or I set up my experiment in the ocean, I want to find it. I want to, and also I want to get data. So how are we engaging these people who are users of the ocean? Number one. And also, how am I engaging other institutes? Because as much as my university, we are mandated to do research, but I need to, because this is something, it's not just a one-time research and then that is it. I want to do MCDR as a solution for climate change. So I need to also see who else can I collaborate with? Can I work with from other institutes, for example? Like in Kenya, we have Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. We have the fisheries sector. We have NEMA, National Environment Agency, that works in protecting the environment. So I need to do that. It's important. And also, before I actually now go to do the research or deploy anything, how am I engaging? Like, do people understand what I'm doing? Does it make sense to people? Like, when I say I'm doing this, it will help solve our problems, but do they understand, or am I just speaking scientific jargon? Yeah, so sometimes in our work in Kenya, we involve journalists. I work with some journalists who are now my friends. So to help, communicate my science and also communicate the issues of the communities, because some of these community members, they have problems, but they don't know how to articulate them to different people. So do people understand what I am actually doing? So one thing we've been doing is also doing small, short workshops, would rather say capacity building, so that our researchers understand, or our policymakers also understand. So generally, I will just say we need to look at how we do research. And the other thing I would like to mention is none of this can be done, with research, and innovation is at the core of humanity. That is clear. Like, I will not be able to use this microphone if somebody did not do the research. It's at the core of anything, of humanity. So if I am to do research in 2025, we need to look at how best can we do it, so that it's protecting our environment and it is inclusive and responsible, because also our populations are increasing and our needs, and also, I don't like to say this, but a lot of African countries are still vulnerable. MCDR is not important to them. We have other issues like hunger and all of this. So how do we connect that to the issues that we are facing? Does this, for us to get support from the people, is to connect that with our livelihoods and the things that are very important to us. So yeah, I'll end there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mariam.
I want good claps.
I like how the question came to you and you were like, "Whoops, what am I gonna say?" And then you ended up just unfolding a lot of wisdom to us. Well, three key things that I think very important. I'm going to sort of circle back with the other panelists. One is, how do we connect science to policy making? Big gap in Africa. We shouldn't undermine that, and I think you sort of flesh it out very well. The second part is, we are talking about these emerging technologies that do not make sense to the average person. So how do we co-create a process that allow them to understand what we're trying to do, and get them to not just understand it, but see the relevance of it? And then the third part, a shared responsibility of, there are present needs of today, right? Whether that is hunger, whether that is, what the adaptation needs that we have, which are sort of present now with the floods and droughts and heat. How do we connect this emerging sort of forward-thinking initiatives to what is needed today? If not, we face a risk, right? We face a risk of, my needs of today is what is important to me, and everything that you want to plan for the future is not relevant. And we know that that is very risky, and that is very part of what you said is, research is fundamental to humanity. Everything we've done as humanity have been centered around research, but research is also always forward-looking, right? Mostly forward-looking of, this is the problem, how do we solve it? Or this is anticipated problem, how do we solve it? So how do we connect that is very important. But I'm going to come to Angela and sort of have two things I wanted to flag. One is the data, which I already mentioned, right? Because you talked a lot about how we could actually do this if we have data. But there's something that Prof. Brown mentioned, which I found super, super interesting, which is AI governance is already an issue, right? So if you combine that with other emerging technologies where the governance there is also very weak, that is a recipe for chaos. So how do you see yourself from where you sit in the role of AI? Where is Africa at when it comes to governance? What is needed that could create sort of the recipe for it to be adopted effectively to play a role in the scientific part?
Right. Yeah, so where is Africa? Yeah, I was just thinking about things, such a thing the other day, and I was trying to construct an abstract for my next paper, in which I was asking the question, have the technologies that are emerging now anticipated for Africa or with Africa? And that has been the biggest question. Who anticipates for us? And have we been part of that anticipation? The reason why I'm saying this is because we have so many technologies and they have landed with a lot of hype. But for some of us who have been researching about their effectiveness, have a lot of evidence showing that these are just tools that are incompatible with what is happening or the realities of our people, the values, the aspirations, the benefits, and everything. But there is definitely a lot of funding that is being channeled towards the development of the technologies versus the governance or the ethical development around the technology, and or who develops, how do they develop, how do they co-create, and all that. And so I can start with the risks around the oceans, because I think this is an ocean-centered conversation. One of the first and most important thing that we need is data. And this is where we as a people, as policymakers, as communities, as scientists, need to work together to find where do we get quality and data that is aligned to the values, to the realities, and to the to what we call the socioeconomic realities of Africans. Why am I saying that? Because oceans may look similar, but they are not. The dynamics around oceans are totally different. The climate weather patterns around different oceans are totally different. The people living around the oceans have different, totally different realities, and they can never be defined the same. And that is why technologies that have come from like the US or from Europe or from Canada or from wherever have failed to work in Africa's setting. Why? Because they have been trained with the data in other contexts. The ocean around America, their dynamics, their patterns, everything is not the same like the ocean around Africa and all that. That's why we can talk about a tsunami in America, but we don't have a tsunami in Africa. But now, how do we ensure that we have that data? And that is the core and most important, because an AI solution is as useless as it cannot be able to predict our own conditions. If it cannot be able to predict anything around us, then it is very useless, number one. And so, number two, we need to start addressing issues of human biases. And human biases, and this is where I position technology and science is very political. Do you agree with me? Science is a very political tool. Why? Because many people, when they are doing science, they are doing for the progressiveness of their nations. They are developing tools, they are developing arms, they are developing whatever they are developing to define what they call their economic futures. And so they come and bring that future and transpose it in our Africa continent. So this is a future defined by the US. For the US, and if you listen to Trump recently, he said that we want to make America the leader of this technology. So part of the leadership is transposed where? In Africa, when that such a technology is brought here and pledged here to be used here. The political dimension also goes, and I'm saying this because I know as scientists we are faced by dilemmas. Currently, I'm participating in a project where we are supposed to adapt European AI applications for what we call what? For green and clean energy. And so they don't want us to develop new technologies. They want us to pick ones that have been developed in Europe and adapt them for Africa context. And that is the only way they are going to give us that funding. So that is where now the politics go. And this is where now you start now thinking as a scientist, how do I work and ensure that my realities, our interests, are positioned well in this particular conversation? So, number one, we have to create data. Because when data is wrong, everything is wrong. You can bring that technology, you can talk about whatever you are having positioning in your lab, but as long as you don't have data that represents your realities, that is wrong, number one. Two, the human biases that are carried by that technology, that is also another thing we have to deal with. Like, for example, we are still talking about that technology from Europe, but I don't know how we are going to deal with the human biases of the original developers of the same solutions, because those developers were sitting somewhere in a context. We normally say in science and technology studies that knowledge comes from somewhere and speaks from somewhere. So whenever you have a tool developed in Europe, it speaks from Europe to Africa. It does not speak from Africa to Africa. But if we have a tool developed in Africa with the human bias of Africa, it speaks to Africa from Africa. So that is number two, how to deal with that. Three, as a political tool, there is a lot of algorithmic biases. And algorithmic biases are intentional, let me be honest. Because these are tools that are developed and injected with little bots inside, which are supposed to drive a certain narrative and a certain message and a certain push. It pushes some things. I'll give you an example of something outside the ocean. If you use, how many people use social media here? Okay, how many channels of social media do you use? Okay, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and all that, right? Now, if you today you go and to your Google Chrome, and you search for something like a male watch, you're looking for the prices of a male watch, right? And then you find it in Google search. Remember, you were searching it in your computer, in your Google Chrome. The next thing, after a few days, or not a few days, a few hours, you'll find the watch advert featuring in your Facebook page. How did they learn? The Facebook algorithm learned from crawling through your spaces to learn that you were searching for a watch. And that's how it works. It's a political tool. So it does a certain push. And in an honest conversation, when we are talking about ocean governance, we are not just talking about a space which is not a contested space. We know it has been historically a politically contested space to date. We know there are countries that are still experiencing Cold War concerning the oceans and all that. So, yeah. And then the third thing that I need to talk about, which is at risk, is about the not fencing out of knowledges. The local people hold a lot of knowledges about the oceans. I will give you one good example of something that offended me, and it is something that I'm bringing into perspective that you may understand what really happens. There was this fisherman. There are fishermen in Mombasa who do a lot of deep sea fishing. And so they know everywhere in the deep seas of the Mombasa coast. But then there is a lady from UK, United Kingdom, a scientist who has been studying whales. And so one day, in her escapades of studying whales, she is taken to the deep seas to see a certain unique species of whales that has never been studied anywhere. So, this is how it is reported, that Professor so-and-so from the United Kingdom has discovered the whale. Who knew where that whale has been? Let's be honest. Who has been the knowers of where these whales, their behaviors, when they appear? Remember, this fisherman has studied this whale for some time to know this is when it features. And now he can be able to confidently take the scientist there and tell the scientist, we will go to in a certain season, certain time of the year, so that you can be able to see the whale. But now the lady is the one who has discovered, and she's been praised in the media. So what are we doing? Fencing out local knowledges that have been existing historically. Who understands the behaviors of marine ecosystem? Who understand the behaviors of the sea? Who understand everything about the marine economy? But they don't have professorship, doctorates like us. And so that is why, my sister, I applaud you. When dominant knowledges, when people who are learned can take an agenda and push it and call it their own, it's a problem. And that is now one of the risks of the emerging technologies, that we are likely to be able to fence out the most important local knowledges that can be able to help us manage and govern our oceans. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about, which is outside the oceans, but most important affects the ocean with the global warming, is that AI and the way it's being used, it's entirely itself a risk to the climate conversation. Why? Because we may be developing tools for the ocean, for climate management, but we are also engaging with generative AI. We are in ChatGPT, we are in DeepSeek, we are everywhere. We are in Google searching and all that. And every day you do a click of a button of search, a click of a button of running generative AI. That means global warming. That means greenhouse gas emission. That means increased electricity usage. And most of our electricity is not clean yet. We are still using electricity from fossil fuels. When we have a click of AI, we mean that increased consumption of water. And water is becoming one of the most expensive items globally. So sooner or later, we may be talking about droughts because of artificial intelligence. We may be talking about heightened global warming. Google was bragging the other day about being able to create AI that can be able to regulate that. But now, the accountability and the manageability of greenhouse gas emission as concerning AI is becoming concerning. So those are some of the issues we need to start grappling with because they all relate to the ocean and the global warming and all that. Yeah.
That was fantastic. Very brilliant. I saw a lot of nods and a lot of agreement, and people were like, "You're speaking my language." People saw smileys on face. People were nodding their head in all directions. You are talking about things that deeply resonate with a lot of people here. And I got a note that folks have questions. So I want to make sure that we have space for that. But, in all of this, one key thing that I take out of it to protect our oceans and make sure that they can serve some of the goals that we are having here on reducing carbon, ensuring that we have precision to do that work, that it has benefit for communities. We fundamentally need the knowledge to be born here. We need to have the ownership of it, which means that, to Marian's point, the science and policy interaction on the continent has to be extremely high. So I'm going to come to you, Prof. Brown, with that particular question. Given that you are a scientist, now a policymaker, how do we really close that gap to ensure that the science and the research that is being done is communicating with policymakers and that we can make tools and resources available to be able to keep producing that research so that the example Angela gave, those local farmers could work with local researchers to go make that discovery as opposed to someone coming in with funding from somewhere to then become the person who discovered this new species of whale. So what is really required? What is needed from your position now, having sat in both spaces, to close that gap?
Yeah, thank you. So first, we need to be ready because all the discussion here has been we get technology imposed on us, but what are we ourselves doing? Are we ready to invest in technologies that will solve our problems? We seem to be seeking for solutions outside of us, outside of our continent all the time. But we also have the solutions right here. So whenever I meet with young people, I tell them that they have the capacity. In fact, the solutions that we are looking for lies with them. The innovation that we can come up with. But then you also find a few young people who come up with innovation, but they don't get the support, or the support system is not there. So one, we need to be ready. And then two, we need to have the investment into doing this. Technology is not cheap. It's not. I mean, whichever way you look at it, it's not cheap. It needs investment. Whatever technology we are enjoying today, some people might have invested heavily into that already, and we are adapting into our situation. The other thing is also where our voices need to be heard. So, yes, sometimes probably we are taken by surprise. And that is why we are having such discussions in Africa. In this space of solar radiation modification, marine cloud brightening, and all of that, we do very little here in Africa and developing countries in general. It has already advanced in developed countries. And the question is, they may get to deployment when they understand it. And as she said, when solutions are coming from elsewhere, or knowledge is developed from elsewhere, the knowledge talk to wherever it's coming from. And the solutions are geared towards where it is coming from. I always use climate models as an example. Africa, we don't have the capacity to develop our own climate models. But we have a huge climate situation we need to find solutions for. So most of our climate models are developed from elsewhere other than the continent. And the climate system is so complicated that with so many variables, so many considerations, that today what we have cannot, the computing system we have cannot take all the issues to be resolved in a climate model or in a computer. So you pick the most relevant, the most important variables to deal with. Now take Europe. What is their concern about much of droughts, much of land use changes? Come to Africa. Every now and then we are developing. We are cutting trees and building new houses. We are even collapsing old houses and building high-rise houses. It's not the same situation we have in Europe and in Americans and developed countries. They already have land use not changing so much. So if you're developing a model and you don't pay attention to land use change is a very critical component of climate system. Because of albedo changes, that is what we do with marine cloud brightening. So it's important to put virtually every situation, including economics, including population, including everything you can't even think about now in a climate model. But we don't have the computing capacity to do that. Even the whole world, even the most developed country doesn't have that. So you go for what is important for you. Now, once that is developed with their interest or wherever the interest is coming from, wherever the knowledge is coming from, we don't have what it takes to do it. But the world is moving. We can't continue to stay behind. So if we are talking about climate prediction, climate is global. Though we have local effects, wind doesn't need visa to move from one country to the other. The emissions of this carbon dioxide emission doesn't need to visa or permission to move from one country to the other. So the effect, wind blows anyhow. The effects of one country's activity affect the other. One region's activity affects the other. So we can't be left behind. We need to do our projections. We need to do our projections to be part of the decision making, be part of the system. So if we are lagging behind, someone will have to do it anyway. So then you get Europeans, Americans doing studies for Africa. I will better project or talk about the climate situation of Africa than any European who has not experienced the climate of Africa. That's the local knowledge she's talking about. So I have experienced, I always just use my birthday as an example. When I was growing up, every birthday of mine, it will rain. There was rain on every birthday until I was at the university level. Then I saw that it didn't rain again. Oh, this is climate change we're talking about. So like a particular day of the year, it will rain. A particular day. I saw that. So if I see a paper written or led by someone who is not from Ghana, and it says, let's say in 1986, it rained on my birthday, I can contest it. But that paper is already published. And the energy I will need to contest that, I won't have it. It's the same with this discovery of the whales. The energy the local people will need to fight, to contest, they don't have it. And again, we have also issues or gaps with the publications. Yes, we don't have the people, we don't have the expertise, we don't have much of it to even project what we have. We don't have much of it. It comes back to meetings like this, UN Assembly, African Union meetings, and all of those meetings. We have representations on the table at every meeting. The voices must be heard. Our situation must come into the documentation. We fought for indigenous knowledge. We fought for adaptation fund. It took so long for UNCCC to agree on adaptation funding. It's like every time we need to push from our perspective, we need a lot of energy to do that. Another problem we have is that we don't support each other. I've been in several meetings where countries, I would say developed countries, will support each other. UK will start an agenda, Switzerland will support, France will support, this will support, this will support. Bring an African to start an agenda, everybody will be quiet, sitting to for a lone ranger to fight it alone. I've experienced that. I'm a vice chair for IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Before becoming the vice chair, I served as a lead author. So I write the report of the IPCC, presented for government to approve. There was one situation I want to narrate here. So in the previous report, the state assessment report, no, that was the state assessment cycle, but that was a report on 1.5 degrees Celsius. So the effects of if the global warming gets to 1.5 degrees Celsius, what would be the impact? Then in the discussion, the authors also said, okay, let's also get to 2 degrees Celsius. So the original plan was 1.5 degrees Celsius, but it got to 2 degrees Celsius as well. So we want to see the impact if we are getting warmer. It will even go to 3 degrees Celsius. The reporting was when we have 2 degrees Celsius warming, the impact will be worse. When we have 1.5 degrees Celsius, the impact will be less. Do we understand what we are saying here? But in Africa, 1.5 degrees global warming is higher. It's like 2.4 degrees warming already. So it's already a huge problem for us if the globe gets to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So I had to contest that statement alone, that 1.5 degrees Celsius is already devastating. 2.2 degrees Celsius will be no-go area for Africa. But the narration before was the other way around. Yes, 2 degrees is worse. 1.5 is kind of manageable. You don't sit down for such narration to go, because this small statement affects adaptation fund, affects mitigation fund, affects every other activity that we do. So we need people on the table to also speak. So our representation must talk, because at the end of the day, the report comes, you see countries that are there for the report to be approved. Yes. And then eventually it comes and it doesn't fit the situation we have on the ground. So some of these things, we need to look at it. I want to get back to marine cloud brightling, our topic. So well, it's the same discussion we are having. So now, countries who have advanced in this experiment and in research, in fact, at the surface, it's a simple process. Spray salts on the ocean surface, get the sunlight reflected so we don't get so much sunset into the ocean. I mean, this is a simple physics phenomena. But then the consequences, even the reflection of the sun back to space, the atmosphere, the interaction it will have in the atmosphere, we still need to do the research on it. Now, with all of those, for me, I still say we should do research and understand how the situation will be for us in future. The fear is that it's happening already. The methods are already in deployment. Whichever scale they are in deployment. The effects, we don't know much about the effect in Africa. I came to meet Angela talk about the glaciers melting. When they melt in the Iceland, Antarctica, it eventually gets to the oceans of Africa in other countries, other coastal areas. We don't see ice here. We don't see snow. We don't see glaciers. But the effect gets into our oceans. We get tidal waves. We get sea level rise. It's eroding our coastal communities. And we are suffering it. But we don't see it start. But we see the end of the problem. So we want to see it right from the beginning to the end. So we understand and we put ourselves in readiness. It will affect our decision making, as we said, from science to governance or to policy making. We have a gap, obviously. First, we need our policy makers to understand what it even means to doing research in this space. Yes, we have poverty issues. We have so many problems. The first time Ghana did, in fact, announced getting into space science, we had a lot of backlash from the community because The fact is that even we are struggling to plant our tomatoes and maize, they feed the ordinary Ghanaian. You are talking about spending, putting investment into space technology. What are you talking about? We have to explain how space technology will actually help remove poverty, improve economics, and all of those things in the system. It takes a lot of energy to engage the policymakers. It takes a lot to engage our decision makers when it comes to science and the result that we expect in the future. So my advocacy is that all of us here must find our way to the top, must find our way to the decision making. And me, I walk the talk. That is why I have not left science, but I do both science and policy at the same time. Because I go to the decision table with a clear understanding of the benefit of doing research, of the benefit of science that we get to today. So if we have, let's say, funding allocation, where do you think my funding allocation will go? It will go into research, especially science research, and not beauty contests, and not music or those other stuff. I mean, we seem to be putting investment in those areas much more than the important aspect of our existence. And for me, if I'm there on the table and have the opportunity, I'll always choose science and science research and innovation.
That was brilliant. Really brilliant speakers. Whoever, unless you put this panel together, that was really fantastic. Thanks a lot. Really brilliant speakers, amazing. There's no way I can summarize that. So I'm just gonna leave it as it is. Yeah, like it's just as great as it is. I'm gonna open up the floor for a couple of questions. I know we have time, but two questions for our panelists to respond to, and then we can close up.
My questions. I've spent years on sea, almost 25 years on the sea with my career. And for what she speaks and everything, we have bigger thing ahead of us. The knowledge economy around the ocean, we are lacking it. And we all sitting here today, we can solve it. Where are the young people here? Where are the future here? No, no. We need to go back to people age 6 to 12. Those are the changers. Those are the people that are going to change our continent. We're talking about, yeah, those are future. These are the people that are going to change our continent. We are talking about AI here. What does AI do? The information you put out there is count it and bring it back to you. How many of those information are we putting out there for ourselves? When we take this back to school, between the age of 6 to 12, we start nurturing them, start teaching about blue economy in school, start talking about climate change in school. That is where we start from. We don't need funding with that. Individually, we can all contribute to that and say, I want to adapt this school, I want to go there, I want to start teaching them about what this is all about. And also, all what you said, Professor, is true. The knowledge economy is lacking. Countries, some early 2 months ago, I was in Spain. Countries are building research vessels for ocean knowledge. What are we doing in Africa? Exactly. Our students, our young age, they're actually going out there talking about TikTok, social media, dancing step and everything. But they should sit here and start learning. In the next decade, we want to see young people there, because by then, you now realize that you are not the future. So they need to actually come here and start speaking to that as well. This is my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you. I think I speak to everyone. It really has been an extraordinary panel and very inspiring. And I'm struck by how much energy and drive and innovation I'm seeing here and you're speaking to. And I ask this. I know this may sound slightly provocative, but it feels so important to speak to everything you've talked about. At the moment, you may know, and others may not. The Australian government has a marine cloud brightening research program that's going on over the Great Barrier Reef. The UK government has a wider solar radiation management research program through ARIA. It's a £60 million program. I'm hearing this energy, this interest, this drive for innovation from I don't know if I characterize this sort of civil society. I know Nana Klutse, obviously you're in government, but as you may know, African governments a few weeks ago passed a resolution saying they didn't want to see solar radiation management being researched. So I wanted to just ask about, people have talked about this sort of potential disconnect that I might be seeing here between what seems to be a drive, a desire to own the research, to lead, to innovate for Africa and to drive those solutions to the African continent. But if a message is coming out of the top of government says, we don't want to see research, again, I'm aware of a lot of funding that there is in other parts of the world that could come to Africa, but won't come if governments are saying they don't want to see the research. So I'd be very interested to know what your reflections are on that disconnect between this energy and the signal from the top of government saying no research.
So yeah, Les, I'm going to give a chance for each of you to respond briefly around the disconnect between big government statements like what happened in Amson on we don't want this, end of story, we just shut the door on it, versus we need to advance knowledge, we need to develop local technologies that are led by us, fed by data that is from here, to help really make the solutions known to us, and sort of like to your point about knowledge has biases, to be biased to our needs and our context, and to have the capacity to be able to engage. So how do we bridge that disconnect?
So I will just repeat what I said earlier on, that we need to be ready to do things for ourselves. So we need to be ready. We need to get our government to invest in what we want to do, the solution we want to bring. And we should be interested. In fact, Africa should not be an afterthought all the time. We need to be part of the process right from the beginning. So where you go to meetings like AMSON and our own African decision makers say, we don't want to talk about climate interventions, then you just don't want to, you can't understand, because we are the very people who are vulnerable and get impacted even more, not because of just where we are, but because we don't have the adaptive capacity to climate impact. So we are the ones who should rather drive this conversation. But if you say we don't want to talk about it, then for me, I don't understand what we really want for ourselves. But some of us will continue to push, because sometimes it takes a single person or a few groups to start a movement, and it works. So all of us here have been a witness to these conversations we have had today. Let's do something in whichever small corner that we have. If yours is to sit upstage and talk, do so. Engage in many conversations as you can. If yours is to use the social media, how many platforms did you say? Go and talk about it in all the platforms. Some are very good with social media. Do it. If yours is to engage one-on-one, do so. If you are good with writing, come up with write-ups. That will intrigue some conversations as well. So for me, we should individually do something. Don't just sit. Do something that will propel some conversations, or that will propel solutions that we need in Africa. We can't continue to complain. We need to start taking actions like yesterday. And it is now that we need to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I really resonate with my brother here. I am a big campaigner of people saying a dollar for a dollar. When we need to grow, or we need to grow, then our governments need to man up. Should I use that word? Yes. They need to man up. I will say this authoritatively, even from this level at our Africa Union, we need to man up. I've seen situations, even look at, I will talk from the context of artificial intelligence. Even look at the strategies that are developed. They are what I would call documents that you just pick, copy, paste, and bring. And allow them to whatever, without investing in research, because they don't want to put their money in it. And I would, if Australian government is bringing $1 million, I would that Kenya would bring $1 million into the table, and we have that discussion so that we can grow technology that causes change. And we support collaborators and partners that are willing to come and cause this particular change. Because again, if we say we don't want research, where are we going with it? If we say, for example, there's been a lot of call for investment in terms of data collection. Government need to fund quality data collection. That is bottom line. This is our responsibility. This, like, let me talk badly from an African perspective. This like bringing a man out there to come and dress your wife, or to come and buy your wife innerwear. Please, data is like innerwear. All right, it sounds crazy, but data is like innerwear. It's a basic, it's a bottom line, it's a lifeline. We need African governments funding data and collaborating with other governments to make this thing work. Because if another government is willing to fund technology, we are willing to provide data. Where are the biases going to come from if we have the quality data, right? And if we are willing to train our own young people, work with other people to train our own young people to develop our own technology, why not? So I think let's go out there and make noise. There is nothing else. Let's go. If we want to be governed well, let's go and make noise. We can never be having, like, sometimes I challenge an occurrence of such a big summit with no actions happening after this. Because all we will go out there as government is saying, oh, we had a big summit, I gave whatever as a president, and so what? My president spoke, so what? My country is still struggling in poverty and all that with no solution. So let's go out there in our homes and challenge our presidents to bring everything that we talk here into action and to collaborate with other people to make this thing work. Please. I mean, we have to make noise. I'm a scientist originally, but now I've switched completely into activism. Thank you.
I don't know if you guys can feel the fire. It is hot
We can
in
feel it.
here. It is very hot in here. So anyway, first of all, I feel very privileged to be on this panel. Then number two, I think African governments don't invest in science. I've been funded by government to do some research from, I think, masters and PhD. But I can't tell you the amount they funded me. It's very little because generally it's not a priority. Research and science is not a priority. But I'm a very hopeful person. I believe in looking at things in a positive way because right now people are advocating for, renewable energy, solar, and governments are investing in that. A few years back, people will not talk about it. People are now talking about having our own, shipping industry, but a few years back, these things, people are not talking about them. So I believe in, I'll just retaliate what my sisters have talked about. Like, number one, we keep on talking about these things in the right places and making sure the message is received. So we make sure we talk about this over and over again because it may seem foreign now, but in a few years, it's going to be something that is acceptable.
Yeah.
Then number two, I love what Prof. Nana talked when she talked about being in positions of decision making, like especially scientists. Many times scientists are left, to do the research, but I think I'm also trajectorying towards being in decision making, because if you're in a position of decision making, your voice is heard, especially in Africa. If today I'm a politician and I say this works, yeah, people will listen to me. So I think being in positions of decision making is very important. And then lastly, I think the way we look at research can be different in different, places. I understand, like there's Australia, and they've invested a lot of money, but as much as our governments have said no, but we can start small. We don't maybe need to start, deploying or whatever, but we can start look at how, like, maybe do feasibility studies to see how relevant it is to our context, and also do small researches. Like we can start, because if we start generating this data, if we start generating this data slowly, eventually we'll have evidence. When I go to speak somewhere and I say, I've done this. For example, we're starting our very first ocean alkalinity enhancement research. So at least I'll have data on that to back up what I'm talking about. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you to all three of you. You were fantastic, brilliant, eloquent, everything that this room needed to hear. And I think that the best way to end this event is to really that call on everyone has a responsibility to get out there and make that noise of making our policymakers, our partners, institutional partners, but also partners who are, of course, in other regions to understand that it is time for Africa's leadership. There is leadership already here, as we can see. And if our government can match it dollar to dollar and make the resource available, invest in the science and the research, we can develop the technologies and the emerging technologies and the solutions that is required to protect our oceans, reduce carbon, and in even excess, really protect the biodiversity that we are used to. Thank you very much, and let's keep the conversation going.